Welcome everyone to Discourse. That's Abel.
This is Tony.
And today we're talking about Cherry by Nico Walker. So this book we found because we were looking for something that was from this new batch of authors coming out of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we were looking for a true story from a soldier that was deployed, which we were kind of thinking about one, and then we found this one. This one's actually going to be turned into a movie.
I think the trailer is out right now, but it doesn't come out till March, maybe?
And I wasn't really sold on it. When I read the summary, I was like, okay, teenager, jaded with life, not sure what to do, joins the army, is a medic in the army, gets deployed to Iraq, and then comes back, gets super into drugs.
Well, he was already into drugs, but that just made it worse, right?
He gets super into drugs, and to feed his drug habit, he starts robbing banks. And that's the gist of the novel. And I was like, okay, well, that's not much to go on. But man, this was probably the best book I've read in a very long time. It feels like he's not very smart. I'm not trying to say he's dumb, but he doesn't tell the story in any kind of fancy way. It's very crude and direct.
Yeah, it seems very personal. Like if you were talking to him, it's easy to read, easy to follow. You don't have to decipher any, what does that mean or what's
any
going
kind
on.
of colorful language or anything like that. That's what I really liked. It felt like somebody, one of my friends was just telling me a story about what happened to them.
Talking about they're making a movie out of this. It is hard to see that because one quarter maybe of the book, it just talks about him, how he not rich, but he's well off. He goes to school. I guess he lives in a small town. What is it, Oklahoma?
Feels like the Northeast.
And he just gets a job, hates it, gets fired or quits, and he gets another job. He bounces around and he just uses money for drugs.
Yeah, his parents give him money as long as he's going to school, and he's not sure what he wants to do. So he's just going to school just because that's the thing to do. And he starts doing drugs before he joins the army.
Correct.
And then one of his friends joins the Marines, and he's like, well, that's a great idea. Let me join the army. And one quote struck me really well. He describes his time in basic training and how really messed up it is and how it's just a big waste of time. And he ends the entire chapter by saying, so don't join the army. I thought that was so accurate. It's a small sentence. Again, it's not colorful language, but it's very poignant.
Yeah, it's mostly just the drill sergeants talking crap, putting him down, making him do push-ups. He said if America was at war and push-ups was
that's how they were going to win the war.
Yeah, because they were great at doing push-ups.
That's how I felt in basic training too. I was like, oh, let me guess, more push-ups. Oh, we're in trouble? Let me just start doing push-ups.
Yep.
I felt like it was a big waste of time, mostly because I felt like I should have been learning something and not just doing push-ups.
Right.
I felt like the army is heavy with menial punishments rather than building you up and giving you some tools that will actually be useful as a leadership and as a soldiership.
So you don't do push-ups when you're getting shot at?
Yeah, I never did. You know what? When I went to Iraq, I actually didn't work out as much as I did when I was in the States. But man, just talking about his time in the army, a good portion of the book is actually about him in the army. But
yeah, it's like
so this novel is fictional, but it's very loosely based on the author's life. The author is spending 10 years in prison for robbing banks. He did have a drug problem. He was in the army, but it's not like a memoir or biography. But I could tell that he did spend time in the army and went to Iraq. Because of the small things he said throughout the story, it just felt so true. And 90% of what he was saying just reminded me of all of the feelings and thoughts I had when I was in the army.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Since it's fictional, does it actually make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. You could tell he was in the army, and everything he said was just spot on. Let me read this one quote that I had highlighted because I spent a lot of time in the army, and I was young at the time, and I didn't really know how to put it into words, the type of people that are in the army. He says this: the thing is, your average infantryman is no worse than your garden variety son of a bitch, but he talks in dick jokes and aspires to murder. I was like, God, again, crude, but so accurate.
Oh man.
That's how I felt about people in the Army as well. Again, I have a lot of respect for the people that serve. I understand that it's dangerous and it's hard. But man, this novel really gets down to the irony of a lot of things in the Army and the irony of going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. One thing I learned about this, about being in the Army that I never knew, was every unit is assigned a medic. And we treat the medic like the local doctor. Like he knows everything. You get like a scrape or a bump or get shot, you go to the medic.
And that's what he was.
I thought they had medical training. But according to this book, he has little more than first aid training.
He went on a lot of missions. Because other guys would either die or they would just quit, or something would happen where he would be called in, right? He would only sleep while on missions.
I think he was on a lot of missions, and I think the problem with medics is that, again, there's very few of them assigned to units, and every time you go out, you have to have at least one medic. So while other people can come off a mission and then go to sleep, he comes off a mission. If they have no other medics,
He will go back
he
in.
has to go back out.
Which he did a lot of. And all he was doing was patching up wounds and using a lot of gauze. Nothing special in assigning those prescription drugs.
Yeah, ibuprofen. He said he has basically ibuprofen and morphine. That's all he has.
That's all he did. Maybe he splinted one guy's leg.
Which is crazy because they give them basically slightly more advanced first aid training.
Yeah.
Right? And they're expected to treat gunshot wounds in combat. Which was crazy to me. And then they're also setting up like mobile first aid stations for Iraqis to come and get medical treatment.
And they expected like a full-on doctor with a degree, and he was just assigning.
This guy barely finished college, had a few weeks of first aid training, is now treating wounds in Iraq from people that have severe illnesses.
Yeah.
And there's one quote in the book again that he says, there's this one old man Iraqi that comes up and needs help. And he doesn't know what to do for him because he doesn't have the training. He goes to tell his sergeant, he's like, hey, this guy really needs help. What should I do for him? And he says, tell him to eat shit and die. I don't care. And then his sergeant goes back to sleep.
Yep. And he just goes off and tells him, and he tells a bunch of other Iraqis, go see a doctor. Here, take these drugs, go see a doctor.
Take some ibuprofen, go see a doctor.
Yeah. No, I was laughing before because there was another old man that needs help, and he sits down to show him his knee, but he shows him his balls. Because he's like...
Yeah. And his balls are like hanging down to the floor. And they can't speak to each other because he doesn't speak English. Yeah. So the old man needs medical treatment. And he just pulls down his pants without letting the medic know what is going on. So all of a sudden, just balls are exposed.
And his buddy's like, he wants you to play with his balls or something?
He wants you to play with his balls.
Yeah. He's not dumb, like Tony said, but he's always nonchalant. He's just like, oh, whatever. Like,
he seems
balls
like
hanging out, blood everywhere. He's just like, well, I guess I'll do what I can and move on.
He seems like an easygoing guy.
Yeah.
He's rough but likable. And I think that comes in the edit. The author says at the very end of the book in the author's note that he worked a lot with editors and his publishing company to make the character likable, because he said when he first wrote it, the character was not likable at all.
He was just a dick, like a douchebag.
So after a few rounds of editing with his editor and publishing company, they made the character likable, which really helps this novel immensely, because I can't imagine not liking the guy in the very dark situations that he finds himself.
Which is a lot. And I thought that was pretty cool with that the editors actually went and saw him in prison. They heard about him somehow. They sent him some books to read, and I guess they were testing him to see if he would pick up on certain like literary cues or writing styles or whatever. So they sent him some more, and I guess they liked him enough. They actually met him in person and brought up this idea of writing a book, which they worked on. And, they made Cherry, which is now going to be a movie, which is crazy for a guy with a typewriter in prison.
Yep, spending a 10-year stretch in prison for armed robbery. But I have a theory about this. So I don't know, but my theory is that the publisher was looking specifically for Iraq War veterans, because right now books from Iraq War veterans are selling really well because people are interested in it, right? It's the hot topic right now. So we need to find people that are veterans that can write an interesting story. And I think that's what they were doing. They were fishing for a veteran that can tell a good story, so that they could sell this book as a book from a veteran.
Yeah, and he talked a lot about being at war, being in the army, but also doing drugs. What he did to get those drugs, and which is crazy, like he was a waiter. He was hosting that party, and he met some guy that just got out of prison, which a lot of us will be cool with them, but after the day, just go home, leave them alone. This dude ends up hanging out with him.
These are not guys you want to hang out with, and he hangs out with them.
He offers him a ride, and he's like, all right. Well, at first he said he could walk home. It's not that far. But the guy kept insisting. And again, this guy just got out of prison. He's drunk as hell. And he keeps talking about, have you ever killed someone? Can you kill someone in the face? Or shoot someone in the face?
So I can relate a lot to what happened in the army. But after he leaves the army and goes off the deep end with drugs, I couldn't really relate, although I could understand what he was saying and appreciate the authenticity of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, I can make some relations from people, you know, a person I heard or a person I know, but I didn't have any direct knowledge of that kind of stuff. But man, does it seem dark, because like you said, he gets slowly into a very vicious cycle of addiction, and then all he can do is feed his addiction, right? His entire day is revolving around feeding his addiction, getting money to buy drugs, to then take the drugs to feel okay enough to go find more money and take more drugs.
Yep, and he was going through dealer after dealer because they would go to prison or they would do something else.
Who knows? Drug dealers don't have very good customer service. So the people you're dealing with when you need to buy drugs are just the worst type of people, which is horrible, because when he said he was addicted to heroin, and he says when you're withdrawing from heroin, you get violently ill, right? He was describing like throwing up on himself, getting the shakes and shivering and not being able to think clearly, and the only thing you can think about is getting drugs. And when he needs to find drugs, he then needs to go see all of these shady people who know he's desperate and will take advantage of him, and then he finally gets his hands on some drugs, and then he takes it home and he's ready to take it, and he finds out it's baby powder.
One time it was baby powder,
Baby powder. He's got to start all over again.
Or they would step on it, I guess, make it like bad quality. Just a lot of things. Or they'll sell them like an ounce, but they'll give them less than that. And yeah, it was horrible. But he was like, well, it happens. I'm a shitty person. He kept admitting he was a shitty person, not the best guy in the world. So people shit on him.
He did mention that the reason why he let a lot of things go is because he knew that he was a shitty person and that's what he deserved. So he just kind of shrugged it off. He was like, oh, I deserve it. And he moved on.
But it's kind of weird because he wasn't really shitty. Like, he saw the homeless guy in Texas. I think it was Texas before he went to, Iraq. And he told the guy, he gave him a cigarette first, and then he offered him to go to Denny's to go eat. So he fed the homeless guy, and he even called his parole officer after the homeless guy told him that he was being like a douchebag to him and like putting him down. He
was like 5 months enlisted in the army. And he was like, I'll call your parole officer and I got your back. Don't worry.
And he used the army as if he had like the army lawyers or whatever, at his back. Yeah. That was interesting, but it was a nice thing to do.
Yeah, there's small things throughout the story that redeem his character slightly. And I wonder if that's just from the edit. But it makes him at least like you can empathize.
Yeah, empathize, and he's very like down to earth and trusting. Because a lot of us wouldn't go with some guy that just came out of prison, get in his car, or go to a drug dealer's house that just said he was going to kill you.
Hey man, that's why
want me to put my ski mask on?
That's why your life is not as interesting as his. He just goes with the flow. Yeah, his writing style is very easy and fluid. I mean, if you're like an English major and you're looking for proper structure, you're not going to find it in this book. But if you're looking for a book that's easy to read, this is it. I had trouble with the first chapter because I was like, oh, that's not how you say that. Or he should have said it differently. Or this paragraph structure is all messed up.
Or he'll say stuff and then it'll just end right there. It's like, so what happened?
But once I got over it and just let my mind out of that editor mode, it was a lot more entertaining.
Yep. Plus,
hold on, there was another quote I wanted to read that was like, why is he saying that? Okay, so here's a quote that kind of shows you his writing style and the odd manner of his writing style. Here's one where he's describing a staff sergeant in the army. Staff Sergeant Kelly had the face like death, and every other word out of his mouth was Joker. He had the black sweater and the green slacks, the patent leather shoes, period. What?
It's like, okay.
I'm not even sure that's an appropriate sentence. There's a semicolon in there with a couple of commas before and after. Anyways, very odd writing style. But you get the point, right? Like, he's describing what this guy looks like. Yeah. It comes across.
He's pretty much telling his story, and you got to remember, most of the time, he's on drugs. So he would repeat words or say, oh my God, the tree is so beautiful.
Yeah, he has a very unique perspective on things in life. Yeah. And I think maybe it's because it's like that drug addict's perspective on life. Not necessarily that it's bad, it's just different.
Different, definitely, yeah.
Let me get another quote for you because, man, this book is so entertaining and it's so quotable too.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one, now that I'm looking through these quotes, there's one thing that he did in the Army that I did in the Army almost exactly. So in basic training, he says, I crawled out of the barracks window to use the payphone. It was night. I had a calling card, right? He's in basic training. He wants to call his girlfriend. He climbs out of the window. He climbs down the building. He runs over to a payphone and uses a calling card, infamous in the Army, to call his girlfriend on a payphone. That is literally what I did to call my wife in basic training. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I had jumped out of the window. It was a couple of us. It was like 4 or 5 of us. We ran across the street and through a little bit of woods to a payphone, and we called all of our wives and girlfriends and things like that.
And snuck back in.
And then we snuck back in. And I was like, man, this is exactly what I did. And it was crazy how everybody in the Army apparently is doing this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm talking about the Army and how it was. Remember that guy that was assigned to their unit, and I guess he was a really religious guy, and he didn't smoke, so they had to quit smoking. And he saw pictures of like Maxim magazine or whatever posted on one guy's bunk bed, and he told the higher up about it, and they were trying to force him to put that stuff down. Were there people like that? Like, you're in Iraq, you're getting shot at, about to die, but you're fucking worried about like cigarette smoke and pictures of girls?
Yeah, there's people like that. The
Like
Army
that.
is full of interesting, different, unique people. And everybody's Army experience is slightly different because it is 100% controlled by your direct supervisors, right?
And they're all
You
different,
imagine like your job that you have right now, you're 9 to 5, you go into work, you come home. Your job and your manager is only at your place of work, right? But in the Army, it's a lifestyle. You're a soldier 24/7. Your supervisor, your sergeant, can show up at any time of the day and demand that you do something. The Army is more like a cult than a job.
Man, how about the porta shitters? Remember
Yeah.
that part of the book?
It's
They thought it was raining?
synonymous with Iraq. I didn't have that specific experience where he describes a sandstorm in Iraq knocking over the porta potties, and then there's this liquid in the porta potties that is now being thrown around by the by the wind, and they think it's raining
Because it hadn't rained for like weeks or months. So they were excited, so they were outside getting wet, taking in this rain.
feeling the rain on their face.
And some
and
guy
then they
tells
realize-
them the porta shitters are knocked over.
Yeah, that's piss on your face.
Yeah, that part cracked me up. Hopefully they have that in the movie, because that'll be pretty fun.
So talking about the movie, I really wonder what's going to be in the movie
Oh, man.
because a big portion of this is him in Iraq, and then
Good amount, yeah.
the last quarter of it reminds me of the book A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, where it's a bunch of drug addicts hanging out together, doing drugs, and getting into some weird nonsense. That's basically what this is. It's like an Iraq War novel first, and then it's A Scanner Darkly that's kind of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, kind of. They're just doing a massive amount of drugs.
And if they don't do drugs and they throw up, they start pretty much dying, right?
Yeah, man, they make it seem like you are dying if you don't get heroin.
They lost a lot of weight. Him and he's kind of on and off with his girlfriend Emily. They get married, they get divorced. And when they got divorced, she was like, I guess we should get divorced. And he's like, all right. And they do it, then they move on. But that was kind of sad too, because he was, for as much of a drug addict that he was and being a dick and all that, whatever, he was devoted to his wife. They got married before they went. He went to Iraq. So girls wanted to fuck him. Some guy's mom wanted to fuck him. But he was like, nope, I got a wife. I'm good. I really love her. But she was back home. She went to the forest for like a retreat. And she went to different jobs. And each place she went, she was getting fucked by some dude.
Yeah, she wasn't faithful and he was faithful. And that's another redeeming quality of his character. And I wonder if that's the truth or if that's the edit. Like, did they change that in the edit to make you feel for him? Or was the reality that he cheated on his girlfriend too? We'll never know.
Well, he did. Nah, I'll leave that out of it.
Oh, I think I get what you're getting at. I
what a
think there was a
student-
moment where he might have.
He did something which is still considered cheating, but he didn't have sex
But
with another
like
girl.
it's mixed in with just a tornado of horrible, dark decisions and things that happened in his life after he got back from Iraq. That it's kind of like, yeah, he cheats on his girlfriend that one time, but it's like one among many horrible things that happened to him.
A lot. And he used to have a lot of sex before the Army, and then when he came back, he did all those drugs and they got worse, and then he just couldn't get it up anymore. It was like
Yeah. So again, his
kind
heroin
of funny,
addiction.
but it's sad. Just reading from the beginning to the end, everything's dead about him.
Yeah,
You know?
his heroin addiction diminishes his sex drive, and you're right. The book was very good about him going to college and then going to the army. It was all very interesting, and then it gets super depressing when he comes back and gets really into drugs because you see how far he's fallen.
Yep, and he loses all of his friends. He meets a nice girl after Emily, which was his girlfriend slash wife slash girlfriend and so on. But he tells her to go away because he's a douchebag. You know, he's gonna do bad things or whatever, and lets her go. And then Emily comes back, and they get deeper into the pool of drugs, and he's about to get killed. He pays the dealers back, and then they're okay again, and he buys more drugs.
Let me read you this one quote so that way I can get your take on it. Oh, this is what he says actually about himself. So I quote from chapter 63. I had a theory. My theory was that I was a piece of shit and deserved it when bad things happened to me.
He said that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a piece of crap. I think he's struggling with things he did in Iraq and his place in the world. He says in the very beginning that he didn't want to go to college because that was what his parents were telling him to do, and that's what society was telling him to do. It seemed like he had issues with being a middle-class suburban kid.
Yep, and he was colorblind. Doesn't answer what you're saying, but...
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, he's colorblind. That's why he's depressed.
Yeah. Just brings up the story of him working at a shoe store, and they're asking for a specific color. He takes like an hour in the, on the back,
trying to find that specific color instead of asking a coworker.
Yeah, it's funny too. In the army, that's how he becomes a medic, because everyone knows the color of blood or whatever.
Yeah, the color of blood's the same. He becomes a medic because he's smart, right? So he's not a dumb guy.
Yeah.
So again, another quote from the army that I think is just spot on. I want to use this as a segue into something I need to get off my chest. So after he leaves the army, his enlistment ends, and he joins the Army National Guard because everybody
They force him to.
They force him to because everybody that signs up for the army has to sign up for 8 years. They don't tell you that initially. Your initial enlistment is your full-time job. Your 4 or 5 years that you sign up, you're spending in the army full-time. That's all you do. But what they don't tell you is whatever years you don't spend in the army, you then have to go either to National Guard or the Army Reserve. So he leaves the army, he goes to the Army Reserve, the National Guard, and he says, my first guard meeting wasn't a smash hit. Everybody thought I was a prick because I was bad at hiding that I thought everybody was an asshole. And
he keeps saying there are a bunch of retired sheriffs or off-duty cops.
It's filled with nothing but off-duty cops and retired sheriffs. And I had that exact same experience in the Army Reserve. I had just come back from Iraq, and I was so done with the Army, but I was forced to join the Army Reserve. So I joined some unit here in Southern California. It was nothing but nice people. They were all very nice to me, but man, I was a prick to them. I was an asshole to everybody because I just didn't want to be there. I didn't want to pretend to be a soldier. I resented the fact that I was forced to be there.
And after being through all that stuff, and now you're like just...
Yeah, and because of the way I treated them, they looked at me like I was a piece of shit, which was totally warranted because they really didn't deserve the way I treated them. I was just in a bad place. Yeah, so I understand where he's coming from.
And being forced into it, you're like, I'm back, I'm done. Nope. But that's over with.
Yeah, that's thankfully over with.
And you're not on drugs.
That you know of. Cocaine's a hell of a drug, man. Yeah. So would you recommend this book?
Yeah. I would recommend it because just the way it's written and the way he tells his story, it makes it a little more personal and you can follow it. Makes it kind of like if you're there with him, as a buddy. Yeah. And you get to see different lifestyles. Because I don't do drugs or any of this, but I know people like family or whatever.
Don't lie to me.
You know
you do drugs. You're a heavy user.
Of what though? I don't know.
Yeah, we're all addicted to some kind of drug, right?
Yeah, that's true. But no, I really liked it. Easy read, and you get to see the side of like these drug addicts, what they go through. Even when he was robbing banks, he would rob just 1,000 or 2,000. He would split it half and half. At least he was an honest guy. He would split it with the driver.
He was an honest bank robber.
Yeah, he was an honest bank robber, druggie, and then he would spend the rest on drugs because he didn't eat anymore. He would just do drugs, and I enjoyed reading that part just to see a different world.
He does say that he didn't get into robbing banks to become a bank robber. He started robbing banks to feed his addiction. He wasn't trying to be good at robbing banks. He just needed money.
He was polite about it too, which was weird.
Very polite.
So
that was his calling card. He was a polite bank robber.
Yeah. So I would recommend it because of that, and also the fact that they're making a movie out of it. But I think Tom Holland is playing this character.
I could see that.
He's a great, actor. I'm just curious how they're gonna put it on the big screen.
Yeah, like what pieces are they going to choose to put in and leave out? I really hope the movie is long so they don't have to compact it into like a short 90-minute video. I want to see like the 2-hour like epic length movie because there's a lot in here that really needs to breathe.
Yeah, especially he did a lot in the army. He didn't think he did. He just broke a lot of, what do you say? He'll go out, bust some doors open, check rooms, come back.
Yeah. And again, man, it just seems like it's so authentic because that's the same way I felt. You first go to Iraq and you feel so threatened and like your heightened sense of awareness and like you're going to die at any moment. 6 months later, while still true that you could die at any moment, you just feel like you're more comfortable doing what you're doing. But it's interesting that by the time you get good at what you're doing, you're then going back home.
And then some new guys will go and they know nothing. And then the cycle just...
And the cycle just rinse and repeat.
Would you recommend this book?
I would recommend it highly because it's a very accurate portrayal of the Army, even though it's fictional. I agree with you that the drug use at the end, while not relatable, is still a vivid look into a different kind of life and makes you understand and appreciate the life they live. Because again, even they say they're heavily addicted to heroin, and him and his girlfriend both know they need to give this up because this is not a way to live, right? They say multiple times, like, we really need to quit. Like they are desperate to quit, but they don't have time or energy to quit because all of their time and energy is focused on getting more drugs.
Yep. And if she tried, she went through, not rehab, but...
Rehab, yeah. She went
to
rehab.
But she needed his help, but he ended up getting more drugs.
He picks her up from rehab and then immediately takes her over to his drug dealer.
Yep. And everything she did is out the door.
And she's very angry at him for getting her re-addicted to drugs.
But then she forgives him.
And then she forgives him because he's a hero to her. He's a hero because he robs banks to get money to give her drugs.
I know, when he first told her that, she was like, all right, do you get my fix?
She was like, yeah, you're a badass. Now where's my fix? Let's do drugs.
Yeah, it's simple like that, but it's I like it. It's a different kind of, story, different kind of book, but it's good.
I really liked it. Well, you ready to go do some heroin?
All